Behind the glittering lights of old Hollywood, a darker truth lurked in the shadows. What if some of the most iconic leading men weren't living the lives the studios so carefully scripted for them? In an era of fear, censorship, and ruthless image control, many stars hid their deepest truths. Tonight, we uncover the secrets of 15 Golden Age actors who were gay but nobody knew that. Number 15. Rock Hudson. By the mid-1950s, Rock Hudson was Hollywood's ultimate dreamboat. Tall, charming, and impossibly handsome, he starred in glossy hits like Magnificent Obsession and All That Heaven Allows. To audiences, he was the picture of rugged masculinity, a man who could melt hearts with just a glance. But behind the silver screen image was a secret that could have destroyed everything. Hudson was under contract with Universal, and the studio knew the truth. He was gay. Public knowledge of this would have been career suicide in an era when being anything other than the all-American heterosexual male was taboo. Universal executives orchestrated fake romances and even arranged a short-lived marriage to his agent's secretary, Phyllis Gates, as a smokescreen. To the public, he was the nation's boyfriend. Privately, he lived with constant fear. Whispers spread through Hollywood parties, but they were carefully silenced. Tabloid reporters sometimes dangled the threat of exposure, forcing Hudson's team into desperate damage control. Yet, his career soared, and audiences remained none the wiser. His on-screen romances with Doris Day and Elizabeth Taylor sold the fantasy perfectly. When Hudson's private truth finally became public, decades later, tragically linked to his AIDS diagnosis in the 1980s, it shocked fans, but it also humanized him, transforming him from an untouchable matinee idol into a symbol of vulnerability and courage. His legacy now stands as a reminder of how much he had to hide to simply survive Hollywood. In the age of paranoia, Rock Hudson's greatest role was protecting his own truth. Number 14. Tab Hunter. To fans of the late 1950s, Tab Hunter was the golden boy of teen rebellion. He starred in Damn Yankees and Battle Cry, delivering the perfect mix of innocence and swagger. Girls screamed his name. Magazines plastered his face across every cover. He was the boy next door, America supposedly adored. But Tab carried a secret that could have ended his career overnight. In reality, Hunter was gay, and Hollywood worked relentlessly to bury the truth. Warner Brothers, his studio, feared scandal more than anything. They created publicity stunts, pairing him with Natalie Wood in staged dates to fool the press. Hunter played along, understanding the stakes. Exposure meant ruin, but in 1955, the illusion nearly shattered. Confidential magazine, a scandal rag infamous for destroying reputations, uncovered Hunter's arrest at a private gay party years earlier. Studio bosses scrambled into crisis mode, spending enormous sums to bury the story. In exchange, Confidential was fed other juicy gossip about Hollywood stars. Tab Hunter was spared barely. Still, whispers followed him. Even as he crooned pop hits and starred in teen dramas, Hunter knew he was walking a dangerous tightrope. His career dimmed in the 1960s, but decades later, he found the courage to tell his own story in his memoir Tab Hunter Confidential. Looking back, his journey is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Hollywood sold him as a flawless teen idol, but the truth was far braver. Tab Hunter was a man forced to live in shadows, punished for simply being himself. In many ways, his hidden struggle is a time capsule of Hollywood's cruelest secrets. Number 13. Cary Grant. Long before he became one of Hollywood's most charming leading men, Cary Grant's story was already shrouded in whispers. Known for his debonair wit in films like Bringing Up Baby and North Maris's Story by Northwest, Grant symbolized suave perfection. Women adored him. Men wanted to be him, and directors fought to cast him. but few knew the hidden truth about the man behind the tuxedo. In the early 1930s, before superstardom, Grant shared a house in Hollywood with another rising actor, Randolph Scott. The two men lived together for years, photographed lounging poolside, cooking in their shared kitchen, and playfully smiling in ways that looked less like roommates and more like a couple. Fans adored the domestic images, but executives panicked. To preserve Grant's image, studios pressured gossip columnists to bury any insinuations. The truth remained buried under carefully orchestrated relationships. Grant married multiple times, though insiders often described the unions as convenient arrangements. Meanwhile, his rumored closeness with Scott lingered in industry memory, a Hollywood open secret. Some whispered that their companionship was more genuine than any of Grant's marriages. Despite decades of speculation, Grant never directly addressed the rumors, instead embracing the role of mysterious bachelor-turned-husband. Still, his enduring charisma and timeless performances kept audiences enthralled, ensuring that questions about his personal life never eclipsed his professional triumphs. Today, Cary Grant is remembered as one of the greatest actors of the Golden Age. But beneath his perfectly crafted persona lay a truth he could never reveal. In an era of strict censorship, Grant lived the ultimate Hollywood illusion, playing not just characters on screen, but playing himself in real life. Number 12. Randolph Scott. If Cary Grant was Hollywood's elegant prince, Randolph Scott was its rugged cowboy king. With roles in westerns like Ride the High Country and 7 Men from Now, Scott embodied grit, strength, and traditional masculinity. He was the kind of actor studios proudly marketed as the embodiment of American values. But just like his close companion, Cary Grant, Scott's personal life defied the image sold to the public. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, Scott and Grant shared a home in Santa Monica, a mansion that tabloids cheekily dubbed Bachelor Hall. Photographs of the two men golfing, sunbathing, and casually domestic fueled speculation. To some, it looked like a picture-perfect marriage, minus the acknowledgement. Studio heads worried. America's cowboy hero couldn't be seen as anything other than straight, so press agents spun elaborate narratives. They arranged faux romances, magazine covers with fabricated quotes, and staged appearances at glamorous parties with women on their arms. The act worked. Fans saw Randolph Scott as the all-American man, never guessing the complexities hidden behind the studio-crafted facade. Yet, Scott seemed less concerned with denial than Grant. He lived comfortably, wealthy enough from his acting and wise investments that he wasn't as beholden to the studio machine. His friendship, perhaps more with Grant, lasted decades, long after their cohabitation ended, and both men carefully guarded the truth until their deaths. In retrospect, Scott's legacy is as much about what wasn't said as what was filmed. His cowboy roles celebrated freedom and rugged honesty, yet his life off-screen was marked by silence and suppression. In many ways, Randolph Scott remains one of old Hollywood's most mysterious figures, a man whose hidden truth was shielded by the desert dust of cinema's golden illusions. Number 11. Anthony Perkins. To the world, Anthony Perkins was forever Norman Bates, the shy, twitching motel owner in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. His performance in 1960 redefined horror, crafting a villain so disturbingly human that audiences never forgot him. But while Perkins terrified millions on screen, off-screen, he lived with a different kind of fear, the fear of his true self being exposed. Perkins was gay, but Hollywood demanded secrecy. Studio contracts in the 1950s forced him into staged relationships with actresses. Gossip columnists hinted at his confirmed bachelor lifestyle, but never dared to dig too deep. Unlike Grant or Scott, Perkins was young, vulnerable, and tightly controlled by executives who feared any scandal would destroy his career. Behind the screen persona, Perkins wrestled with anxiety and guilt. Friends later revealed that he struggled with being forced into double lives, crafting smiles for reporters while suppressing his own truth. His fame after Psycho brought wealth and recognition, but it also intensified the pressure to hide. Publicly, he dated women. Privately, he built quiet relationships with men, careful never to be seen. In 1973, Perkins married photographer Barry Berenson, which provided another protective layer for his reputation. They remained together until his death, raising 2 sons. Whether the marriage was based on companionship, love, or necessity remains debated. When Perkins died of AIDS-related illness in 1992, the irony was bitter. His most famous role was about secrets festering behind locked doors, and his own life mirrored that haunting theme. To this day, Anthony Perkins is remembered as a gifted actor, forever trapped in Hollywood's cruel paradox, playing monsters on screen while hiding his most human truth off it. Number 10. James Dean. James Dean was the embodiment of teenage rebellion. In Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden, he radiated a raw intensity that made him an icon of youth. Audiences saw him as the ultimate bad boy, reckless, moody, irresistible. But off-screen, Dean's life was marked by a secret that Hollywood could never admit. Behind the leather jacket, Dean's private world was complex. Friends and biographers later revealed that he engaged in relationships with both men and women. In the cautious climate of 1950 Hollywood, this was dangerous ground. Studios wanted him marketed as the heartthrob every girl dreamed of, not as someone who blurred traditional boundaries. Gossip magazines occasionally whispered about his closeness to certain men, but his star power and early death shielded him from scandal. Dean himself seemed less interested in labels than in living freely. Some insiders recalled his defiance, claiming he once said, "Why not? I'm not going to go through life with one hand tied behind my back." But he also played the studio game, appearing in public with actresses like Ursula Andress and Pier Angeli, the latter rumored to be his great love. Many believed their relationship was staged to quiet speculation. Tragically, Dean's death in a car crash in 1955 froze his image in time. He became an eternal symbol of youthful rebellion, forever 24, forever enigmatic. In death, the rumors of his hidden truth became part of his legend, painting him as more complex than Hollywood ever allowed him to be. James Dean's legacy is haunting. A brilliant actor who never had the chance to fully embrace who he was. His rebellion wasn't just against authority on screen, it was against a world that demanded silence. Number 9. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift was often described as the male Marilyn Monroe, gorgeous, fragile, and endlessly tragic. In films like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity, he brought vulnerability and intensity to the screen. He was part of Hollywood's method generation, alongside Marlon Brando and James Dean. But unlike them, Clift lived with a secret that tormented him. Clift was gay, though the studios worked tirelessly to mask it. He never fit the mold of the rugged all-American hero, and yet he was cast opposite some of the most glamorous women of the era, from Elizabeth Taylor to Olivia de Havilland. Publicists invented romances, planting stories of affairs with starlets to protect his image. In Truth, Clift's relationships with men were carefully hidden, whispered about in industry circles, but never confirmed publicly. Then came the 1956 car crash. After leaving a dinner at Elizabeth Taylor's house, Clift crashed into a telephone pole. Taylor was the first on the scene, reportedly pulling teeth from his throat to save him from choking. The accident shattered his face and career. From then on, Clift was haunted not just by physical pain, but by inner torment. His drinking worsened, and so did his mental health. Friends described him as tortured by having to live a double life. Despite delivering unforgettable performances, including in Judgment at Nuremberg, Clift's career never fully recovered. He died in 1966, at just 45. Today, Montgomery Clift is remembered as one of Hollywood's greatest lost talents, a man of immense artistry destroyed not only by tragedy, but by the suffocating silence forced upon him. Number 8. Raymond Burr. To television audiences, Raymond Burr was the ultimate symbol of justice. As the sharp-suited lawyer in Perry Mason and later the relentless detective in Ironside, Burr exuded authority. Raymond Burr, viewers trusted him. They believed in him. But off-screen, Burr was living a carefully constructed lie to protect his truth. Hollywood marketed him as a tragic figure who had lost a wife and child young, but those stories were fabrications, part of an elaborate biography crafted by publicists to divert attention from his real life. In reality, Burr was gay, and he lived quietly with his partner, Robert Benavides, for over 3 decades. Their relationship was one of deep loyalty, though never acknowledged in Burr's lifetime. At the height of his fame in the late 1950s, Burr played along with the false narratives. Magazines published tales of his grief, casting him as a sympathetic widower devoted to his work. The public bought it, never suspecting that the truth was far more ordinary and far more dangerous in Hollywood terms. Despite the secrecy, Burr thrived in television, becoming one of the medium's most recognizable faces. But he also endured isolation, forced to mask the joy of his personal life from the world. Only later, after his death in 1993, did the truth of his long partnership with Benavides emerge. Raymond Burr's story is bittersweet. He was celebrated for portraying characters devoted to justice, yet he himself lived in a world where justice denied him honesty. In the end, his legacy rests not only on his towering performances, but on the quiet love he kept hidden from public view. Number 7. Farley Granger. Farley Granger was young, handsome, and full of promise when Alfred Hitchcock cast him in Rope in 1948. The thriller, based loosely on the real Leopold and Loeb murder case, was daring in more ways than one. Its undertones of hidden attraction and secret desires mirrored the life of its star more than audiences ever realized. Granger was gay, but in an era of censorship, he lived in a world of shadows. Off-screen, he moved in circles that included playwright Arthur Laurents and composer Leonard Bernstein. He had relationships with both men and women, never fully concealing his truth from those close to him, but carefully navigating Hollywood's unforgiving climate. Publicists crafted stories linking him with glamorous actresses, even though insiders knew the truth. Working with Hitchcock only deepened the irony. Rope was coded with subtext, depicting its murderers as intellectual partners whose intimacy was palpable. Granger played the nervous accomplice with such intensity that many later pointed to the film as a thinly veiled depiction of forbidden love. The studio insisted otherwise, but whispers lingered. Granger's career never reached the heights of his contemporaries, in part because he refused to fully submit to the studio system. By the 1950s, he walked away from Hollywood for theater and European cinema, where he found more freedom. Later in life, he openly acknowledged his relationships with men, publishing a candid memoir that erased decades of speculation. Farley Granger's story is one of resilience. In a time when truth was dangerous, he chose honesty in the end. His performances remain haunting reminders of the coded ways Hollywood reflected its own secrets. Number 6. Sal Mineo. Sal Mineo burst onto the screen in Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, playing Plato, the troubled teenager devoted to James Dean's character. His sensitive, yearning performance made him one of the first Hollywood actors to capture queer-coded longing on screen, though audiences didn't recognize it at the time. Off-screen, Mineo lived with that same hidden truth. He was gay, and unlike others who kept the closet tightly locked, he gradually allowed cracks of honesty to show. Studios tried to frame him as a teen idol, pairing him with starlets, but he was never entirely convincing as the dream boyfriend. Instead, he leaned into edgier roles, earning 2 Academy Award nominations. The 1960s, however, proved unkind. Hollywood abandoned him as his youthful looks faded, and his openness about his private life cost him roles. Still, Mineo refused to disappear. He turned to stage work, directing and acting in productions that gave him more creative control. Friends said he was finally beginning to live authentically when tragedy struck. In 1976, Mineo was brutally murdered outside his Los Angeles home. The crime was later determined to be a random act, but rumors swirled that his death was linked to his private life. The whispers reflected the paranoia of the time, when being gay still carried stigma even in death. Sal Mineo's legacy is heartbreaking yet heroic. He brought a rare tenderness to his roles and lived more openly than most of his peers dared. His tragic end only amplified the sense of what Hollywood lost, a man who was never afraid to show vulnerability, both on screen and in life. Number 5. Clifton Webb. In Laura, 1944, Clifton Webb gave one of the most unforgettable performances of the Golden Age. As the acid-tongued columnist Waldo Lydecker, he brought wit, elegance, and a razor-sharp presence to the screen. Critics adored him, audiences were captivated, and Webb suddenly became a household name at an age when many actors were fading. But Clifton Webb was different from the Hollywood mold. He was openly gay within his personal circle, though never acknowledged as such publicly. By the standards of the 1940s, his effete mannerisms and cutting delivery already defied convention. Some critics even called his performance in Laura too flamboyant, though it only added to his allure. Off-screen, Webb lived with his mother well into adulthood, a fact tabloids highlighted with mocking undertones. Studio publicists worked tirelessly to frame him as a dedicated bachelor, married to his career. Meanwhile, whispers of his sexuality swirled in industry corridors, though few dared print them. Unlike many of his peers, Webb never married or staged fake romances. He seemed indifferent to playing the game, confident in his talent and his carefully guarded privacy. His longevity in Hollywood proved remarkable, with memorable roles in The Razor's Edge and Cheaper by the Dozen. By the time of his death in 1966, Webb was celebrated as a uniquely gifted actor whose sharp wit set him apart. Only later did critics and historians more openly acknowledge the truth he couldn't reveal in his lifetime. Clifton Webb's story is a reminder that sometimes the most authentic performances in Hollywood were hidden behind the curtain, not on the screen. Number 4. Ramon Novarro. In the silent era, Ramon Novarro was MGM's answer to Rudolph Valentino. With his dark eyes and magnetic presence, he rose to fame in Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ in 1925, becoming one of the studio's most bankable stars. To audiences, he was exotic, dashing, and impossibly romantic. But behind the screen, Novarro carried a truth that Hollywood could never accept. Novarro was gay, and like Valentino before him, gossip magazines constantly speculated about his private life. Studios went to great lengths to craft an image of heterosexual virility, pairing him with leading ladies and promoting carefully staged stories of his romantic exploits. Insiders, however, whispered that Novarro's heart was elsewhere. As the silent era gave way to talkies, Novarro's career stumbled. He transitioned into character roles, but the loss of leading man status left him vulnerable. Behind the scenes, his private life became increasingly difficult to manage in a world that punished honesty. By the 1960s, he was mostly retired, living quietly in Hollywood. Tragically, Novarro's story ended in horror. In 1968, he was murdered in his own home by 2 men he had invited inside. The crime was sensationalized, with tabloids latching onto salacious details overshadowing his once great career. Instead of remembering him as the heroic charioteer in Ben-Hur, the public was fed lurid headlines. Today, Ramon Novarro's legacy is complicated. He was a pioneer of stardom, yet his private truth became his downfall in a crueler society. His life reflects both the glamour and the brutality of Hollywood's golden machine where secrets could kill. Number 3. George Nader. George Nader never reached the heights of Rock Hudson, but for a time in the 1950s, he seemed destined for stardom. Handsome, charismatic, and signed by Universal, he starred in Robot Monster, 1953, a film so notoriously bad that it became a cult classic. Despite the laughable script, Nader's striking looks kept audiences watching. But Nader had something in common with Hudson. He was gay, and Universal knew it. In fact, Nader and Hudson were close friends, moving in the same circles. Studio executives worried constantly that gossip magazines might uncover the truth about either man, so they engaged in elaborate cover-ups. Unlike Hudson, Nader never broke into superstardom. Confidential magazine began circling, threatening to expose him in the mid-1950s. The studio made a ruthless choice. Hudson was too valuable, so they sacrificed Nader. His career in America dried up almost overnight. Rather than disappear, Nader reinvented himself in Europe, where censorship was looser and his identity mattered less. He made German adventure films, lived more openly with his lifelong partner, Mark Miller, and carved out a different kind of career, one less glamorous, but far more honest. When he died in 1997, Nader left behind a life that symbolized Hollywood's cruelty. He was expendable in the eyes of the system, cast aside to protect another star. Yet, he found happiness on his own terms, proving that even when silenced, truth can survive. Number 2. Van Johnson. In the 1940s, Van Johnson was MGM's golden boy. With his fresh-faced charm, he starred in 30 Seconds Over Tokyo and The Human Comedy, quickly becoming one of America's most beloved actors. He was marketed as the perfect boy next door, clean-cut, patriotic, and safe. But the real Van Johnson lived in quiet defiance of the image MGM forced on him. Johnson was gay, but MGM executives refused to let that truth see daylight. When rumors began circulating, the studio orchestrated a marriage between Johnson and actress Eve Abbott. The twist? Abbott had previously been married to actor Keenan Wynn, one of Johnson's closest friends. The arrangement reeked of studio interference. More contract than romance. Behind the scenes, Johnson lived a carefully coded life. He enjoyed quiet relationships with men, but always under the radar. Hollywood insiders knew, but to the public, he remained the affable everyman. Fans loved him for his musicals and war dramas, never suspecting the elaborate fiction that shielded his real story. Johnson's career waned in the 1950s as younger stars replaced him. He transitioned into stage and television work, enjoying a steady but less glamorous life. In his later years, he grew more private, rarely commenting on the whispers that had followed him since his youth. Van Johnson's story is a textbook example of how Hollywood manufactured illusions. The studios sold a fantasy, while the man himself lived with a truth he could never declare. His smile lit up the screen, but behind it was a silence enforced by fear. Number 1. William Haynes. Long before Rock Hudson, long before Cary Grant, there was William Haynes, the first openly gay star of Hollywood. In the silent era, Haynes was one of MGM's brightest leading men, starring in films like Tell It to the Marines in 1926. He had everything: fame, fortune, and adoring fans. But unlike others, Haynes refused to hide who he was. Haynes lived openly with his partner, Jimmy Shields, at a time when that was unthinkable. Louis B. Mayer and MGM executives begged him to marry a woman for appearances. Haynes flatly refused. The studio gave him an ultimatum: conform or be cast out. Haynes chose love over stardom. True to their threat, MGM ended his contract. Overnight, his career vanished. But Haynes reinvented himself, becoming one of Hollywood's most successful interior designers. His clients included some of the biggest stars of the era. Ironically, the same industry that had rejected him. Haynes and Shields remained together for nearly 50 years, a testament to resilience in an unforgiving world. Their partnership endured longer than most of Hollywood's staged marriages, and when Haynes died in 1973, Shields followed soon after, unable to bear the loss. William Haynes is remembered today as both a cautionary tale and a trailblazer. He proved that love could matter more than fame, even in a world built on illusion. His defiance makes him not just number one on this list, but the bravest of them all. Behind every glittering marquee and smiling magazine cover, Hollywood's golden age was built on secrets. These actors gave us unforgettable performances, yet carried truths they could never share. Their silence shaped cinema history, and their stories haunt it still. Which actor's hidden journey surprised you most? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more forgotten Hollywood secrets.